Today, Gaming America is speaking to Joseph Solosky, the Managing Director of Sports Betting at NASCAR. As the league positions itself to use betting to enlarge its viewership, we were able to talk to Mr. Solosky about methods deployed to achieve this vision. Mr. Solosky, thank you for sitting with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
My first question, I guess, is sort of a personal one, but could you tell me perhaps a bit of your personal history and how you got to arrive at your current role in the industry, please?
Yeah, for sure. I have a lot of people ask me that question, especially trying to start out and get into sports betting. And my background is not necessarily replicable. I wouldn't try and do what I did, but I really kind of fell backwards into sports betting. I was in my prior career was in military and the intelligence community in the US. And I moved overseas because my wife was stationed in Germany. So when I moved over there, I saw how, this was in 2015, saw how mature sports betting was, and just kind of a common practice. There were places where you could, kiosks where you could place a bet at an EPL game, for instance, which just kind of blew my mind. So I started looking at different firms that were hiring. I started working for Sportradar in November of 2015, selling data for them in Africa, Asia, and Europe. And then in 2018, when sports betting legalized, I stayed with Sportradar and moved to the US and sold data to US bookmakers. And then this opportunity came along for NASCAR, and it was a dream job for me, and started that March 1st last year. So I've been with the league for just over a year now.
Cool. Moving on to the league, I suppose, because NASCAR, as I understand it, is a relative newcomer to betting. I mean, legal betting is relatively new to the US, and NASCAR is sort of new to betting in general. I was wondering, just sort of the technical aspects of betting on NASCAR. But what are the variables and factors that come into play when you place a bet on a NASCAR race?
Yeah, so the chief market for NASCAR and the most popular market right now is outright race winner, right? So people do a lot of research on drivers' performance at the upcoming track, lap times, performance the previous week, how they performed at tracks that are similar to the upcoming track. So there's a lot of research done on the driver level, on the track level, past performance, predictive performance. But really, it comes down to the data. So NASCAR is unique in the sense that there are no stoppages in play. Like when there's a commercial going on the broadcast, there still is action going on. So you have to rely on a trusted feed. So the NASCAR timing and scoring feed is really the building blocks of what our sportsbook partners and even non-sportsbook partners who take data from Genius Sports, that's what they rely on to provide accurate, reliable, and fast data provision.
Sure. And I mentioned that most a large majority of sports betting in America is not NASCAR. I'm wondering, and this is a very broad question, so you could take it in any number of directions, but how are you aiming to grow the market share of NASCAR in the sports betting world in the United States today?
Yeah, you're right. NASCAR is relatively low on the handle side. I think a lot of that is, even before 2018, before the repeal of PASPA, obviously there was offshore betting happening in the US to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, depending on some estimates. And there was even less handle happening on NASCAR. As I said, it requires a true official data feed to power it. And being an offshore markets don't really provide those in-depth data feeds. So a lot of people weren't betting on NASCAR, whereas people were betting on MLB, NFL, NBA, kind of the traditional stick and ball sports. So when sports betting was legalized, people were already, in some sense, betting on these other leagues. So NASCAR was a little bit behind the pack there. But really, it's education, it's awareness, and we're doing that with not only as a league, but also kind of at an arm's distance with our sports betting operating partners who will run promos around NASCAR. They will introduce new markets, which has happened a lot this year around NASCAR sports betting, that makes it more of a seamless transition from betting on the NFL to betting on NASCAR. So you're right, a huge goal of ours, if not the chief goal, is to increase handle on the sport, because we think an increase in handle will increase fan engagement and ultimately attendance, and to grow our fan base.
Sure. I have to ask, have you seen things improving or increasing over the last year?
Absolutely. From 2020 to 2021, we had 2.5 times growth in handle. Again, starting from a low number, right? Still very
Yep.
impressive, but we were starting from a low number in 2020. What I'm really proud about is our growth from last year to this year across our authorized gaming operators, which are our official sportsbook partners at NASCAR. They did more handle in the first 2 races alone this year than all of February and March combined. So we are off to a really good start. And of course, it's not just, NASCAR organically growing. There's part of that as well. It's also worth acknowledging that more states have launched since last year. So we do, consider that into account when we talk about the growth, but we've even outpaced the growth in terms of total addressable market. So there is an organic part of this as well.
Mm-hmm. Does NASCAR see the introduction of the betting aspect as a means to grow viewership overall? And do you think that's been working?
Yeah, that's really my strategy in this role, and that's what I believe. So, like I said, handle is something that we can directly measure, right, in terms of growth year over year and interest in the sport from a betting perspective, and converting fans maybe the NFL or NBA to NASCAR. But that is, Cameron, the ultimate goal for us in the organization long term. Is, I view it as simple as because an operator is offering a interesting market on NASCAR, or presenting in a way that is similar to how NFL is presented, or NBA, they may bet on the sport. And because you bet on NASCAR, you may watch the race. You probably will watch the race to see how your bet turns out. And then you watch the race, and it might be the first time you're exposed to it, and you're like, wow, I want to see that in person. So you go to a race. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, Cameron, I went to my first race just in June of last year. In addition to working for the league, I've become a fan of NASCAR myself, from just being at the track and experiencing all that comes with going to a NASCAR race. So it's really about using betting as a means of getting someone who may not be into NASCAR, getting them into watching NASCAR, and then going to one of our races and becoming a true fan.
Sure. And I did want to ask, because like I'm from New York myself, and we have this idea in New York that NASCAR is much more popular, say in the South, or Indiana, of course, and the Middle West. Would you say that that betting is more popular in these betting on NASCAR is more popular in these sort of traditional heartlands of NASCAR?
Yeah, well, it's honestly hard to say yet, because I would say the kind of NASCAR country states, a bulk of them anyway, have not legalized. The Southeast has been a little bit behind the curve, or just taking up legislation at a later time. So, this year, hopefully Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina will legalize, where we'll see, kind of the Southeast home of NASCAR. If that increases interest and increases handle and betting, we anticipate it will. But surprisingly, or not surprisingly, we've seen a lot of interest in terms of handle from states like Pennsylvania, from New York, from Michigan, Indiana, like you said. So to have this growth year over year in states where, like I said, I grew up in New York and wasn't really introduced to NASCAR much as a kid, but there still is a lot of betting happening there. So we're encouraged to see that. And when we do as a country legalize in states like Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, Texas, we will see growth as well, because that is more of the traditional NASCAR country where we run our races, et cetera.
Is there any impending legislation specifically, or impending legalizations that you're following closely at NASCAR?
Yeah, absolutely. In some of the states we just mentioned, actually. So North Carolina, I believe that they're on their way to legalizing this year. It's something that we've been very involved with as a league. There are other teams and leagues who have been involved with that as well in the state of North Carolina. I believe they passed in the Senate last year. They did pass in the Senate last year. They passed a few committees. So that'll be a couple less hurdles when they go back into session, I believe, this May, for the House to pass, and hopefully hopefully passes this year. Georgia's another one. Teams and leagues have been involved in that discussion for a couple of years. So it looks like they're making good headway. It's something that we're following really closely. There's obviously Atlanta Motor Speedway there, and Road Atlanta as well. So from a racing interest, it's a state that I think will present itself well to in the introduction of NASCAR sports betting legally.
Sure. I wanted to move on a little bit to NASCAR's partnerships with sports books. I know you partnered, if I'm not mistaken, with Penn National, WinBet, BetMGM, and Fubo Sportsbook. And I was wondering, what do these agreements between sportsbooks and NASCAR look like? What is a beneficial partner, and what do you hope to achieve out of these partnerships?
Yeah, so when we look at sports books to partner with, we're very strategic about, we want to work with a brand who really is passionate about NASCAR. And what I love about all of the books that you mentioned who are our partners, they're all vying to be, and they want to be, and they have made actions to be the place where NASCAR bettors go to bet, which is fantastic. That's the type of partner that we want to work with. And on the opposite side of that, we want to deliver value to them as well. We're always worried about, from a partnership marketing and sales side, to not dilute brands and not dilute our partners. So that's giving each of our sportsbook operators verticals that they can operate in, where there's a clear messaging that this operator owns this piece of content or part of NASCAR from a sports betting angle. So that's really what we try to provide value to in our operators. And what we hope to achieve is really a symbiotic relationship where NASCAR is helping to grow their brand in the states that they're operating in, and that they help grow NASCAR from a handle perspective, from a fan engagement education perspective, through their sportsbook offerings on the sport.
Mm-hmm. And are there more partnerships on the horizon? Perhaps you can't speak about details, but are you looking to expand in that regard?
Yeah, we are. Again, it's all about working with brands who want to work with us, and there are brands who want to work with us. Especially after the growth that we've seen this year, the great racing that we've seen early on this season. I think that there's just more buzz about the sport. So we, even are getting inbound now from operators wanting to work with us. So I think before the end of the year, and certainly even sooner than that, you'll see us engaging in more partnerships from the sportsbook angle.
I guess you've proven you can monetize the model.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we don't hide the fact that there's a revenue opportunity here as well for us. Again, chiefly, the goal for us is increasing fan engagement, but there is a revenue model that works well for us and the operators, because in any agreement that we have, our operating partners get hospitality assets, email database access, marketing spend assets across NASCAR.com, our social channels, et cetera.
Sure. I also want to ask about another partnership you guys have with the American Gaming Association. And from what I read, this is sort of to address responsible gaming. But I was wondering if you could just elaborate a bit on the partnership and what you get out of it, and if it's been successful.
Yeah, I really value our relationship with the American Gaming Association and what we built even before I came on board, and the last year I've been here. That team is very passionate about responsible gaming and gambling, as are we. This is something that is new to a certain percentage of our fans. I would say a large majority of our fans, it's new to them, right? So we want to make sure that they're armed with all the resources that they have to bet responsibly, bet within their limits, setting a budget. And that's what the Have a Game Plan initiative is all about at the American Gaming Association. And tied to that as well, integrity is first and foremost in NASCAR, from sports betting all the way through everything we do at NASCAR. So the first deal that we signed when sports betting in this legalized sports betting space was the Sport Radar and the integrity side. And that is, for internal monitoring of suspicious betting activities,
Mhm.
which, Sport Radar notifies us of every week. And knock wood, there have been none so far on NASCAR. And, we're doing everything that we can, and Sport Radar is doing everything that they can to make sure that that continues to be the case.
Sure. Wrapping things up, and I sort of always ask this question at the end, but where would you like to see betting at NASCAR in 18 months from now?
Yeah, so I'd really like to see betting on NASCAR as something very similar to what you see as betting on NFL, NBA, MLB. Part of the percentage of fans who do want to bet on the sport, I want it to be an easy, seamless, enjoyable experience for them. So one of the ways that we're going about this actually is, as I mentioned earlier, one of the most popular markets, if not the most popular market, is the outright winner. In fact, it is by far the most popular market right now. What we've seen with our operators this year, and even operators in the space generally, is a focus more on head-to-head driver matchup betting. So, a head-to-head driver matchup is all about the money line. What we've seen also introduced this year is a point spread or position spread differential. So how many laps that these drivers who are matched up against one another, how far ahead or behind will someone be? So 3.5 positions, you have that point spread baked in there. And then what I'm hoping to get at in 18 months possibly is an over-under of whether it's positioning finish or total points gained in a race. So those three things right there will look exactly like a X team versus Y team money line spread total. For NASCAR, we'll be able to have that as well. So it'll be a very seamless transition when you're going from one vertical to another on a sports book.
Sure. Well, I wish you the best of luck in this endeavor, and thanks for speaking
Cameron.
with us today. This has been Joseph Solosky, the Managing Director of Sports Betting at NASCAR. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cameron.